Hey everybody, my name is Nathan Branson, and I'm here to talk about my brother's passing um, for Johnny Underwood's death and dying class. And because of the virus and the fact that we're all online now, we're going to have to do this online. We were going to do this face to face, but we're going to try to do it online. So I hope that you guys can access this video and are able to see it. So I'm going to shoot for talking for about 20 minutes about this. Mr. Underwood has sent me some questions, and so I want to briefly just talk about my brother's passing. So I'll be looking back and forth at another computer screen just for some notes that I took on my other laptop. um, so I had a brother. His name was Daniel, and I want to show a picture of show a picture of him real quick. If you can see that without the glare. He is right here. Oh, that's me. Sorry, no, this is backwards. This is my brother Daniel. We are blood brothers. We don't look alike. Um, I don't think we look alike, but this is me. I'm sorry. This is me right here, and in the middle is my cousin, and he's about to go in the Marines, and we all look very different. He's about to go off to the Marines. He's got his head shaved and all that. But my brother and I were growing our hair out. In this picture, my brother is, I believe, 19, and then I'm over here, and I have a long beard. My hair is long. Those were the days when I was actually cool. Now I'm a teacher. I'm not as cool. I might be a little bit cool still, but my brother and I didn't look alike. So let me briefly talk about Daniel. Daniel was 3 years younger than me, and the picture I just showed you, I was 22. I was a senior in college, and my brother was he was hilarious. He was really, really funny. He grew his hair out. He had a big afro. Um, Somehow we came from the same parents, um, even though we looked different. He actually looked like my dad's side, my grandfather, and then I look like my other grandfather. And so we took on strong characteristics from each of our grandfathers. But my brother, the main thing that stands out about my brother, he was so funny. He was hilarious. I'm an English teacher. I teach writing and literature, and I'm more serious person. I don't consider myself a funny person, but when you think about one characteristic of a person, my brother always made me laugh. He was class clown. Um, I was a senior, and he was a freshman in high school. All my friends thought my brother was hilarious. He also liked to make fun of people. He he had a lot of courage in that way of um, doing it in a loving way. Or do it not loving, but he would do it in a very way that brought people in um, and joke around. So that's one of the main things I wanted to say. Whenever you lose somebody, you just miss their parts of their personality, especially things that sort of complement your own. Like me, who I'm not that witty. Um, but my brother also was kind of a serious person like myself. So we both like to think and ask questions and reflect and have conversations. And so he had the same qualities as me, plus the wittiness. So uh, yeah, he had a very interesting, well-rounded. Um, as a person, he was very well-rounded. So my brother passed away in a car accident in 2007, about a year after this picture was taken that I just showed you. And he was in a Jeep Liberty, and they were coming home from a Atlanta Braves baseball game. And um, he was with his girlfriend in the back seat of the Jeep Liberty. Jeep Liberties, they have sunroofs, and they had this particular night there was 6 people in this Liberty, and they had the windows rolled down, and it was a freak accident because front axle, right front tire just snapped off. It was strange. Um, and the two people in the front seat had their seatbelts on, but nobody in the back had their seatbelts on. And so everybody in the back was thrown out, and they were all about 19 or 20, and they all were thrown out, and the four people in the back all passed away. um, so one of those people was his girlfriend, Suzanne, she was amazing, amazing person, and she passed away too, and so it was funny. They were high school sweethearts, and we ended up having a funeral for both of them on the same day, and we had a wake service for both of them, which was I've never seen so many people come to a wake as that particular funeral. Um, how was my family informed? That was another question that Mr. Underwood wanted me to answer. And I was in Slovakia. I was helping, or I'd been there for 10 months with a Christian organization. I was doing some missionary work in Slovakia, which is a country south of Poland and the Czech Republic, and then it is east of Austria. And so it's over in like Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and I was over there, and I was just the 6 hours ahead of America. So my brother passed away at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then they called my parents, and my parents were trying to reach me, but I was just hanging out on a Sunday morning at about 11 a.m. And I was on Facebook and on my computer in Slovakia and just relaxing. And my friend sent me a message on Facebook and it said, "Hey, I bet your brother's partying with Jesus right now." So my brother was working at a Christian camp, and so I assumed since he was working at the camp, my friend Brandon was talking about my brother just having a sort of spiritual experience at this camp, like everybody does whenever you go work at a camp. It's just amazing a lot of times. So I'm like, oh, my brother's having a good time. I didn't think anything of it. But if he would have said anything else, it would have probably freaked me out because it would have been like, what was he talking about? So, yeah, I almost found out on Facebook, which is, I'm really glad I didn't. So about an hour later, my mom got a hold of me, or my dad called me and told me over the phone. And so I found out when I was over in Slovakia. So thankfully, I was surrounded by about 20 other college students who were visiting for the summer, helping us with our ministry. Most of them were from NC State and South Carolina, and they were really supportive, and I really enjoyed being around people once I found out. um, so the so I got a plane home, and I came back to North Carolina. Um, so after that, Johnny wanted to ask me how did I deal with the grief of my brother. Um, I think the first 2 months were pretty amazing. My brother had so many good friends, and I knew a lot of them. So a lot of those people would just show up at our house, and maybe on a weeknight, and we would just kind of hang out at our house. And so there was not much isolation for 2 straight months, and that was incredible. For me, I'm more of an extrovert, and so I like to be around people, um, and so for me to be around those people for probably about most of that summer, 2007, people would just show up at our house and hang. Um, I also remember the week after it happened, people that I hadn't seen in a long time or had never really been to our house would show up, like childhood friends that I had not seen in a long time. It just showed up. So I felt that was very helpful right after, um, just for people to show up, and there seems to be a lot of lines that no longer exist, no distinctions. There's just like everybody's on the same page, and especially since my brother and his girlfriend were so young. So a lot of people were very generous. But I really enjoyed seeing that. If there's anything that good came out of this, it was definitely that picture of people with no pretension or no distinction. They just wanted to support our family, and you get a small picture of that at funerals sometimes. Um, Later in the year, 2007, it was harder in the fall. It was about 4 months after. There were less people around, and I often found that sometimes I would. I remember one of my friends. I feel like he was kind of avoiding me. Um, that might have been in my head, but um, I know that I was not I was sad during that time. So maybe my presence wasn't easy to be around. So, but about 3 or 4 years later, his mom passed away, and we have been really good friends ever since. So at the time, he didn't understand what I was going through, but whenever his mom passed away, now I understand what he's going through. So it seems like we connect much easier than we did when we were childhood friends as well. Also felt after that happened during that time, about 4 months after, you go through phases. 4 months after, I just was kind of mad because I was alone a lot. There was nobody around, and I was working at my dad's auto shop, so I would just come home and it everything just felt kind of meaningless. Um, so I remember one time just throwing my cell phone across the yard in anger because I can't remember what I was mad about, but it's one of those things where I was pissed and then I threw my phone and then as it left my hand, I saw the trajectory of the phone was heading toward the brick house, my parents' house, and I was like, that was stupid. And then my phone hit the brick, and somehow it didn't break it in 100 pieces. So being angry, I think is part of grief, especially a couple months after when some of the people have faded out. And um, so let me scroll down. I got other questions. Um, and so Johnny asked, what is it like now?" And I would say now is, I think that hole for my brother's passing is still there, even though it's been 13 years. And as I mentioned earlier, his sense of humor is missing. That brings people. His humor always brought people together. Um, and so I don't really think that I can. I mean, I guess that for me, I could try to replace his humor. Um, I'm more of a conversationalist. I like to just talk about topics and hash out things. I like to uh, think about things, but I don't know if I have the sense of humor, so I don't know if I can replace that. And that's always been a question I've thought about in terms of grief. I think I've come to the conclusion that we do need to replace somebody who had a role in our family, but I'm not really sure how to do that practically in real life. Johnny asked me also, um, how are others helpful during this time? And I think the main thing that I loved from other people, um, as I said earlier, I just loved it when people would just walk into my grief, or really it was my family's because I was living with my family for about a year after my brother died. So I just loved it when people would just come to our house. And it was probably intimidating for them or a little bit scary, or they're like, oh, they want their sort of space. But in my opinion, I liked it when people would just come to our house, show up, and be there. And my friend um, Matt, his dad passed away this past summer, and I thought, why not just go over to his house? And that's what my parents and I did. He was actually Daniel's best friend, Matt. So Matt's dad passed away, and so we'd already been through my brother's passing, so we just all went over there, and were around during that time period. So I think showing up and being there, and that's just me. Not everybody's like that, but for me, I like it when people are present and they're just sometimes just kind of killing time um, with you. Maybe you watch a movie, just having that presence there. Um, Another thing I loved whenever the people did was just tell me stories. I love hearing stories from other people. Um, I love hearing about other people's lives. Um, some people aren't necessarily storytellers, or they don't think of themselves as good storytellers. But if there was some detail that I didn't know about that happened to them, be like, hey, this, I had somebody tell me one time, hey, when I was in middle school, your brother ran into the back of my mom in his Chevy Blazer. So this girl who was younger than my brother told me about um, when my brother bumped into her, and I was really nice surprised. Just little things like that. I never knew that my brother had that accident, um, and so any details like that, even if they're very small, are helpful to hear the full picture of parts of my brother's life that I didn't know about. Um, and Suzanne's father, so Suzanne was my brother's girlfriend, and she passed away the same night. Um, he and I were emailing with one another, and he said that talking and thinking about her is the only way for me to remember who she was. It is the memories and those feelings that move my emotions and make me understand how much I loved her, what an important part of me and our family she was, and what we're missing. She's not here to tell her story. Only stories and memories can do that. So since my brother's gone, he can't tell his own story. So that there's only the people who are left who knew Daniel or Suzanne to tell the story. So um, if they're not there, then the only people who can tell the story is people around. And so there's kind of a barrier there that we have to overcome of, hey, it's okay to talk about people who've passed. Just let's talk about um, their personality or their things they did, even if we've talked about the same story a few times or multiple times. Let's just tell it again because otherwise their personality fades out. Um, um, got like two more questions here. um, what are some things that were not helpful to you or your family during this time? And I would say, people would say a lot of times to me, you'll know, they would typically say the phrase, everything happens for a reason. And then they would say, you'll know why. And then I would always assume that would be soon. So I think most things happen for a reason. Um, I think a lot of things happen for a reason. Um, that's a pretty deep statement in itself, but definitely believe that. However, the timing of how I will know why it happened, um, that is the question for me, and that was hard for me to accept, or it was confusing because people say, "Well, you'll know why it happened," and so I felt like it was like a movie. And if something tragic happens in a movie at about an hour in, you wait another hour, and by the end of the movie, a lot of times that is resolved in a way that the main character is satisfied with. Um, but for me, I was waiting. Maybe October 2007 is 4 months after. December 2007 is 6 months after. I'm waiting and waiting, and I'm like, when's it going? When am I going to find out the sort of grand narrative of why my brother died? And I didn't really know. And even when people would, there's like four people who named their kid after my brother. A lot of his friends and some of our family friends, and so people, well, look how much these people admire your brother, and I'm like, oh, that's really good, and I really that's awesome. These kids are named after my brother, but in my mind, I'm like, well, what? Why? What's the big reason? What's the silver lining that sort of is the addition after this big subtraction? And so that was the question I was always asking God. I needed to see the big addition, or the cohesive moment whenever it all clicks. And I think in our minds, we're trained when we watch movies to things to be resolved an hour after the tragedy of a movie, but um, I don't. It's not like that in real life, and so I've accepted that things happen for a reason, but I will know maybe in the next life. Otherwise, I think I spent uh, maybe 4 or 5 years waiting and waiting and waiting on some grand silver lining to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and then you're just like, why did this happen? So I think to tell people that they're going to know the reason, it feels like so many people said that or implied that to me, and I was mad whenever I didn't see that. And a movie that is kind of the opposite of that, or to me seems a little bit a picture of that, is Manchester by the Sea. It's a sad movie, but it's got Casey Affleck, and there's a tragedy that happens at the beginning of the movie with his kids passing, and his two of his kids die, and then he has to live life after that. And so I think that is a question for me. How do you cope when you don't understand the meaning of it all? For me as a Christian, I have accepted the mystery that I will understand things. This, my brother's passing, in the next life. And that's taken me a long time to accept. Um, so that is that is something that I've always been curious about, how different people cope with that situation. Um, and how am I now? Um, Johnny asked that question as well. How are you now in the grieving process? I think there's two things. I still think that I'm being thankful for the bits and pieces of good that have come from after my brother's death, and accepting that I might not understand why it happened. Still in that process. Another aspect of that is, um, I think that I'm trying to think about how I can replace his role in my life as a friend and somebody who makes me laugh. And um, and so I think that replace, I don't want to call it replacement. Obviously, nobody can replace him, but at the same time, like, who, in terms of friendships and relationships, who could take his place? Uh, that's kind of something that I'm interested in knowing about, but I'm not sure how to do that. Um, and then, yeah, I think that would probably be one of the main ones. I think um, one of my friends in grad school, his name's Phil. He's really funny, really witty. In a lot of ways, we've been friends for about 8 years now, and I kind of think he was almost like a replacement brother. Um, and Yeah, so I'm been. I mean, I'd like, and another thing, I guess for me, as I've been doing for 20 minutes talking on this video. I like to talk about this topic because I like to hear about other things. So, in terms of grief, I like to talk about it, and I like to hear what other people do since Daniel's memory and is still there. I think in our family, we think of it as before Daniel died and after Daniel died. And so I'm always curious to how other people firsthand practically deal with grief. I like to talk about that because I don't want to hear some theoretical perspective. Um, you know, you hear a lot of cliches, so you have to fight through all the cliches regarding grief. And so, which cliches are ones that have helped you, and how? I don't want to hear details about that. So I think that's another aspect, even 13 years after it happened. Um, but yeah, I'm glad I was able to share about this. Thankful to Mr. Underwood for teaching this class. I think this is a very as Americans we don't like talking about this kind of stuff. So I think it's excellent that he's teaching this university level class at our community college, and anybody who's a human being has to deal with this kind of stuff. And for some reason, as Americans, we just don't talk about this very much. But yeah, thanks for letting me share, and thanks for watching.